For the last 9 months, I've been building a framework in a business publicly. I've been through so many changes with my branding, my message, my target audience, and I mean literally everything. But there's something that I didn't realize was also changing, and that was my identity. My identity was also changing through all of this. When I started this journey, I started addressing all women who could relate, right? Because I thought that was the right thing to do. And I didn't want to exclude anyone. Not realizing that the one person that I was excluding was myself, my story, my lived experience as a Black woman. I suppressed myself at the expense of others. And what's harder than just learning this truth was that I've been doing this for the last 17 years. Welcome to Too Much for the Room. Now let's get into this week's episode. So let me tell you what happened last week, right? Literally, I was doing research. I was looking into burnout statistics and trying to understand the patterns that I've been documenting for the last 17 years, such as why do I keep burning out? Why do I keep going from job to job? Why do I keep feeling like I don't fit into these spaces, like I'm just literally not supposed to be here, right? And these patterns that I've truly been living by all came up in this week's research. And I want to say it started with a study that I seen by Dr. Carey Yazeed. And there was something that came up in that study that made me stop. Now, it wasn't just the data itself. It was the specificity. It was the way she was naming patterns that I recognized within myself, patterns that I actually been living, patterns that I'd been documenting without even realizing that there was already research for it. So what did I do? I kept digging. I needed to understand more on understanding what exactly am I missing, right? So I found Dr. Cheryl Woods-Giscombé. Please forgive me for if I butcher these names. I'm so sorry. And her work on the Superwoman Schema. Then Dr. Thema Bryant, Dr. Daphna Oyserman, and Dr. Joy Harden Bradford. These are Black women, researchers, thought leaders. They are doing the work that sounded so similar to what I've been documenting for years. So I realized that I'm not alone in this. There's a whole lineage, a whole history of Black women who have been naming these patterns, studying them, and teaching from them. And I had no idea they existed. And why, you may ask? Because I've been avoiding looking for them. You see, I've been keeping my work broad, general, right? Including everybody. Saying things like high capacity people, depth-oriented individuals, language that literally could apply to anyone. And while I was doing that, I was actually missing the through line that's been there the whole time, which is my story. See, I'm a Black woman, right? And I've been documenting my experience as a Black woman, shrinking and shifting and changing and adapting into spaces that are truly not meant for me. And the patterns that I've been seeing are the patterns that show up specifically for Black women. And the crazy thing about that is that I've been too afraid to say that out loud. But let me explain why. For those of us that are, You may understand this, and you may know exactly what I'm about to say, coming from a Black woman's perspective, because you lived it too. We learn early on that being too Black is a liability. That if we want to succeed, we need to make ourselves more palatable, more universal, more acceptable, more digestible. So we learn to adjust our voice, our tone, our presence. We learn to perform a version of ourselves that feels safer in professional spaces. And the research calls it code switching. And it's real. 61% of Black employees report compromising their authenticity to fit into dominant workplace standards. That research is from the published article in the Harvard Business Review. And 34% of us actively code switch at work, which is significantly higher than the 20% average. But here's the thing. Code switching doesn't just stay at work. It follows you home, into your relationships, into your creative work, into the voice in your own head. And I brought it into ESSENTFLOW. When I started building publicly, I was afraid. I was afraid that if I made this work too specific to Black women, I would lose people. I would be too narrow. I would be too much. So what did I do? I kept it broad. I kept it universal. I kept it simple. Telling myself that this was a strategic move. But really, I was just doing what I've always done. Making myself more palatable, more digestible. Translating my experience into language that everyone could relate to. Even though the experience I was documenting, the patterns, the exhaustion, the specific kind of burnout that comes from sustained performance across every domain of your life. That experience is not universal. It's specific and it's cultural. And I was afraid to say that. So let me tell you what I found when I finally let myself look. I found the Superwoman Schema. Now, it's a framework that is developed by Dr. Cheryl Woods-Giscombé, a Black woman researcher at the UNC Chapel Hill. Now, the Superwoman Schema describes 5 beliefs, core beliefs that many Black women carry. 1, the expectation to show strength at all times. 2, suppression of emotions. 3, resistance to being vulnerable or depending on others. 4, determination to succeed despite limited resources. And 5, helping others even at your own expense. Now, how many of you raised your hand and said, "That's me"? Because when I read that list, I saw myself completely and entirely. The overperformance, the belief that I had to be twice as good to be seen as half as competent, the refusal to ask for help, the driving myself into exhaustion to prove that I belonged, to prove that I was worth something. That wasn't just high capacity. It was something more specific. And then I read this quote from Dr. Woods-Giscombé. And she said that these beliefs have helped us survive. But survival is not the same as thriving. And y'all, when I tell you I sat with that. I let that manifest and simmer. Because she's right. She's literally right. Everything I learned about performing, about being excellent, about never showing weakness, all of that helped me survive. It helped me survive. It got me through spaces that weren't always welcoming, but it helped me succeed. but it's not the same as thriving. And Essent Flow isn't about survival strategies. It's about reclamation. It's about figuring out who you are when you're not performing anymore. But you see, I couldn't teach that clearly while I was still performing in my own work. Then I found research on identity incongruence. It is basically the exhaustion that comes from living a sustained misalignment between who you are and who you perform to be. And it's not just for a day, it's not for a project, but chronically across every domain. You are exhausted from living sustained misalignment. And what I realized is that that's what I've been documenting for the last 17 years of my life. The specific experience of being a high capacity Black woman who learned early that her natural self needed to be managed. Yeah. Who installed a performed version to succeed. And who is now trying to figure out how to come back home to herself. That's the work I've been doing. That's who I'm actually speaking to. And this is what I'm realizing now. Essent Flow has always been for high capacity Black women. The patterns I've been documenting: Superwoman expectations, sustained performance, code switching, exhaustion, multi-domain identity incongruence. These aren't generic patterns. They're cultural. And when I talk about essence, which is the phase where you reconnect with who you are underneath the performance, I'm talking about something very specific. I'm talking about discerning your native self from your installed self. See, your native self is who you were before you learned that you needed to adjust yourself to be acceptable. Before you learned to code switch. Your installed self is the performed version of you. The one that knows how to navigate professional spaces. The one that adjusts automatically. It's like a switch. You turn it off and you turn it on. And then you turn it off again and then you turn it on. You do it so much that it's literally almost like a second skin. And the one that over delivers to prove she belongs. In essence, is where you do the work of discernment, of figuring out which parts are still yours and which parts you took on for survival. When I talk about foundation, which is building something that is fully yours, I'm talking about building in a way that doesn't require you to perform to succeed or shrink or feel smaller than. So that means building platform independent, building on channels you own, building something that honors who you actually are instead of who you learned to be. That's sovereignty. That's reclamation. In my lived experience as a Black woman, it's not a limitation. That's my credential. Because I'm not observing this from the outside. I've lived this. And I've documented it. My experience is the data. And that's what makes this work real. So here's the invitation. If you're a Black woman who's been building after bedtime, with limited time, limited budget, and trying to figure out how to build something real without performing as someone else, this is for you. If you're navigating Superwoman expectations, code switching, exhaustion, and the specific kind of burnout that comes from sustained performance across every single domain of your life, this is for you. If you've been told you're too much your whole life and you're finally ready to stop believing it. This is for you. You found your room, sis? Welcome. ESSENTFLOW is built from the experience of a Black woman, and it honors our capacity instead of exploiting it. And if you've been waiting for someone to do this work without translating themselves, softening their words, this is it. You were never too much. The room was just too small. And now we're building a bigger one. This is Too Much for the Room. And I'm Shay Thomas, capacity strategist and researcher. And from here on out, I'm speaking directly to and about the lived experience of us Black women. And if that's you, I'll see you in the next one. And if you want the full deep dive on this subject, on this topic, on this transition, make sure you listen to the podcast episode on ESSENTFLOW by Shay, Too Much for the Room. Link is in the bio. See you in the next video.